Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Laprie.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kim Laprie, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive their first few years, but actually thrive. Today on episode 38, we're talking about making small changes to improve your teaching. And this is beneficial whether you are still in your credentialing program and you're about to student teach, or if you already have your own classroom. But making small changes along the way really do have a large impact. But first, if you are a new teacher, and most of you are, and you're completely exhausted, you're overwhelmed, and you're tired of not knowing what to focus all of your energy on, then Angela Watson's 40-Hour Teacher Workweek Club is absolutely perfect for you. Now, I've mentioned this before, especially in episode 36, where I interviewed Angela and we talked about how to take back your time, and we talked more about the program. But what's awesome about this program is that it's stretched over an entire year so that you can go at a comfortable pace and not feel overwhelmed. And the club dives into every aspect of teaching, from classroom organization to grading and parent communication. And I personally went through the club a few years ago, and it's really changed my teaching. So if you go over to 40htw.com, that's 40htw.com. Be sure to mention that Kim Laprie sent you, or you can also put my email, kim@teachersneedteachers.com, and they'll let me know that you heard about the program from this podcast, and I'll offer you additional support as you go through each month. Also, and I've been mentioning this in past episodes, don't forget to leave a voicemail with your favorite things about teaching. So you can find out more information at teachersneedteachers.com/voices. And I have some questions that you can answer in a Google voicemail for me that I will feature on an upcoming episode. And as a thank you, I'll send you a Teachers Need Teachers podcast sticker. And you guys, they are so cute. They are amazing. I'm so excited to have them. And I'm already shipping out my first one to Joshua, who was featured in episode 37.
Hi, I'm Chris Nesi from the House of EdTech podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. And make sure to check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And now, the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
So as I mentioned in the introduction, this is the time of year when people love to make promises of change for the coming year, also known as New Year's resolutions. Now, we know that most of those don't last very long, as evidenced by the surge of gym rats on January 2nd and the number of empty treadmills on January 31st. And it's not because people don't have good intentions, but a lot of times their goals are too big and they're not specific enough, and they don't have a plan. So second semester, or the time after winter break, is a great time to make adjustments in your teaching. At this point, you know your students and have some systems in place, so why not pick something small but significant to change and improve? These small changes do add up over time, and, they're going to lead to longer lasting results. So here's the process I've found to be successful time and again, as well as what I plan to adjust this semester. So I'm going to go over the tips, and then I'm going to tell you how I'm applying it to myself. But first, let's start out with the positive. We don't want to just focus on the negative and everything we need to change. Let's celebrate some wins here. So first, identify what's working really well in your classroom. And don't be, a Debbie Downer and say, nothing's working, everything sucks. Think of things that are going well, that light you up and make you happy in your classroom. And make a list of what you're doing to make those things happen. For example, I have a strong relationship with my students, and in turn, they behave well for me. So that's what's working really well. And what am I doing to make that happen? I get to know them. I let them get to know me. I have a good balance of cracking jokes with also getting down to business. I have high expectations of them while also understanding their individual needs. I'm also good at breaking down concepts into manageable and understandable pieces. So what I do is I use a lot of analogies that my students can relate to, and I also use repetition to really solidify a concept or idea. So again, let's start out with the wins and celebrate what we're doing well in the classroom, because those are things that we don't necessarily need to work on, right? Okay, so in terms of what to change, the first thing that you want to do is identify one thing that you want to work on and be specific. Don't just say classroom management. That's a really broad goal. And so what about your classroom management do you think needs fixing? Could it be just that there are a few students who are the instigators of, unruly behavior, and you need to work with them so that you can repair relationships with them and get them to cooperate? You see how that's more specific? So we don't want to just say, I want to work on transitions. What about your transitions need help? At which point are things breaking down? So for me, I'd like to do more student-driven lessons. So this could be in the form of station rotations, breakout activities, maybe some project-based learning, Genius Hour, flipped lessons, things like that. I want lessons where the students are in the driver's seat. Now, I tend to really like control in my classroom, to be honest, and that helps me ensure that all of my students are working. But I've always wanted to incorporate a way for me to give the reins to my students. I'm afraid that without my direction, they won't accomplish anything or it'll take too long. So it's definitely something that I've always felt deep down inside is a weakness for me, and I want to chip away at it this coming semester. Okay, so now that I've identified the one thing I want to work on, the next is to set realistic goals to fix that one thing. So don't try to fix everything because then it won't stick. Just remember that you have all of your teaching career to fix everything else. So just pick one thing at a time. So for me, in order to release control, I need to start with one lesson or part of a unit. So I was thinking that since I typically run out of time for grammar and mechanics, I could use this as an experiment to see if I can do less direct instruction. And that's another thing with me, with grammar is I feel like I have to really just walk them through it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they don't need all that direct instruction and they could just use supplemental materials instead. So my goal is, first I'd like to review verbs, subjects, and predicates because I've already taught that, and then eventually get them to prepositional phrases. So if I can have some sort of weekly individual practice, that would get me to prepositional phrases by the end of this first grading period or progress report. Okay, so that's my goal. Next, I want you to picture your classroom, your students, and yourself. Picture what it would be like if that one change was successful. And this is really important to visualize this. Be a fly on the wall and imagine the activities you would do, how the students would behave and work, how you would deliver the lesson and assess the students, or in my case, what it would look like if they were working on their own. So you just really want to get this in your mind's eye. You want to picture it and almost feel like you are part of it and it's happening. So a lot of times we call this manifesting. I don't know if you've heard that term, but it's basically visualizing it, putting out into the universe that this is what you want. You're going to show up and do the work for it. And as a result, the universe or whatever it is that you believe in terms of a higher power will answer this and give you what you need. So I do this a lot, not just with teaching, but with pretty much all aspects of my life. And sometimes I don't get what I want. And to me, that means that the universe is telling me that it's not what I need or it's not going to be good for me. And other times I do get what I ask for, but not necessarily in the time frame that I'm requesting. But either way, if you don't put it out there, how is the universe going to know that this is something you want? So for me, if my students could get a better grasp on grammar, I could use grammatical terms when discussing problems in their writing. And that is just something that I would love to do. I would love to use that grammar-specific vocabulary in conversation in English. I mean, it's hard to say this prepositional phrase needs a comma and explain why if they don't understand conjunctions. If they understand these terms, then their writing would be clearer. I mean, I'm picturing it, especially with the students who really struggle with writing. I'm really imagining their writing would be clearer. It would have a variety of sentence structure, so not just simple sentences, not just run-on sentences. And overall, their writing would be more grammatically correct. Okay, so the next step, write it down somewhere on paper, maybe a note on your phone, in a Google Doc. Just write it down and set your intention. So what you have is your one thing that you're going to fix, your goal, how you're going to fix it, what it looks like. Write all of that down. Don't just let it live in your head. Again, you're pushing this out into the universe. You're setting it in writing so that you can look back at it and remind yourself, okay, what is it again that I'm trying to accomplish? Because it's easy to just default into old habits. It really is. This is why I haven't done this yet, you guys. I mean, I've had this intention for so long, and I'm finally going to be serious about it and take these steps because I've done this for other parts of my teaching. And I'm thinking, why is it taking me so long to just release some control? So I put this intention for me in a couple of places. Now, first, I like to journal on my computer using the Day One app. It's an app for Mac. I don't know if I'm sure they have one for PC. They also have it for iOS, but I mean, you can use anything for free, any type of word processing, program. But I just like Day One because it also has a calendar and it indicates which days you've journaled. And I don't know, I just like the format of it. I also like to make more of a step-by-step plan in the Notes app, which is both on my Mac and it's also on my iPhone. And they're connected so I can look back and see what the plan is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down which lesson will be taught each week. And this will help me stay on track. And if I get off track, then I can also make adjustments. All right, next. Write down what it will take to achieve that goal and be really, really honest with yourself. You might have to rebuild relationships with some students if it's classroom management. There might be that one student who is always being defiant, and even though you kind of don't like them, you might have to suck it up and start from square one and rebuild that with them. And you might feel like you're losing face, but just think about how that student affects you and how your relationship with that student affects the rest of the class. So a lot of times you have to, put on our big boy or big girl pants and just be the one to go and repair the relationship, even though we know the student is wrong, but just remember, they're a kid. Another thing is you might have to change some aspect of your teaching or planning. So to do this, you might also have to ask someone to observe you and give you feedback. That's actually really valuable if you're saying, okay, hey, my transitions just aren't working. They're falling apart. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Can you please come in and watch a lesson and tell me how I can improve? So often we are just stuck in the moment. We're stuck in our heads. We think we're doing the right thing and we don't exactly know at which point things are going wrong. So whether it's transitions or classroom management or how you deliver a lesson, maybe you're thinking, I have these really engaging lessons and yet my students are completely bored and they don't want to do the work. Why? And it could be your delivery of that lesson. So it totally helps to have someone come and observe you, someone you trust, and give you feedback. For me, this is the hardest part because I'm going to have to do some research. So I have to research what I already have in terms of materials for grammar. I also need to figure out what I might have to create myself or see what's out there on the internet that's offered for free and maybe even on Teachers Pay Teachers. So I've used the free version of a program called No Red Ink, and it has a lot of grammar resources as well as assessments on there. And it works fine for assessment. I would never use it to actually teach grammar because it's just more of practice. If you've ever used it before, you'll know what I mean. However, the students also get really tired of it. Even though there are things in there that make it so that they can personalize some of the sentences and exercises, they still get really tired and bored of it. So I don't want to just use that in order to teach grammar. I could also use a hyperdoc format where I put the links to videos and my own supplemental materials for each lesson. So a hyperdoc could be something like a Google slide, or it could be a Google Doc, a Google drawing. And basically, you just insert hyperlinks, as I said, to different resources. And I'll put a link in the show notes that goes more in depth on hyperdocs, but it also allows students to be more self-directed, which is why I'm thinking that this might be one of the better vehicles for administering these lessons. So I would include assignments and ways to assess students. And I could also have students go through this hyperdoc at their own pace with a grammar quiz on Friday. This way I can assess whether or not they're making any progress. So this means that students could study as much or as little as they want, but they'd have to be ready for that quiz, which would be part of their grade. On some hyperdocs, there's an actual product on there that teachers grade, but for me, I would just have them take the quiz to assess them. I also know that I have quite a few Teachers Pay Teachers resources that I've purchased in the past, so I'm thinking that I could incorporate this type of practice into the hyperdocs. And again, students can practice as much or as little as they see fit. I do need to fit in a system for students that don't understand a concept. I mean, even though I'm trying to make this more self-directed, I think I'm just going to need to also carve out time for students that are still confused. All right. So our next step is to figure out when we're going to start this. When is our deadline? Now, I already have a plan for my first week back to school, and we're going to continue analyzing a novel that we began in December. So I think my best bet would be to start it the week after the Martin Luther King holiday. And so this will give me 8 weeks until the first progress report. And at that point, I can assess and see how my pacing is going and if my students' writing has actually improved. Once you've figured out when you're going to start it and what your deadline is, you also want to think about how you're going to track and assess your progress. I mean, are you going to create some sort of graph or chart or graphic organizer? Are you going to journal your progress? Be sure to make it concrete so that when you take a few steps back, which will inevitably happen in the process, things aren't always going to go perfectly, you can look at the situation objectively and know what to fix. So here are the ways that I think would work for me. First, I could give a pretest before each grammar concept. This can communicate to both the student and me where they're at in terms of understanding that concept. And so this can also determine how much of the hyperdoc they need to complete. And I'll give them a post-test on Fridays, as I mentioned before, to see whether or not they've improved. So I'll use their quiz scores to track their progress along the way. Another way I could do this is I could give a quick write assignment and have students revise and analyze the writing based on each week's new grammatical concept. Or I could also have them identify that new concept within their own writing. For example, if the concept is coordinating conjunctions or fanboys, if you guys know that term, I can have them identify the presence of coordinating conjunctions, whether or not it's used correctly. And if they don't have one, they can explain why they didn't need it in that sentence and also what they would need to do in order to add a coordinating conjunction properly. So you see how it's not just identify them, but also how would you use them? I can also use mentor texts and have students identify problems with the grammar in those sentences. And finally, if a student isn't grasping a concept, I'll need to determine if they need additional time to practice. So this is important when you're trying out something new. Remember what your goal is. For me, my goal is to have them not only understand grammar in terms of identifying it, but also being able to discuss it and use it in their own writing. And in order for me to also reach an important part of my goal, which is having this be more self-directed, I'm going to have to resist the urge to use direct instruction for this, because I need them to train themselves to seek out what they need in order to master grammar. Now, this could completely fall apart, you guys, and just be a disaster, but I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to structure this well enough and have my resources be in a logical order and be exactly what the students need in order to learn this, and also trust that I'm going to give them enough practice to apply it so that it's not just grammar out of context, because a lot of studies have shown that learning grammar just for grammar's sake doesn't actually do any good. So it's going to take a lot of planning, and I might get tired of it, but I think in the end, it's going to work out. I really do. I have to believe that it's going to work out. All right, next, and this one's a biggie. How will you reward yourself along the way for hitting certain benchmarks? The reason why this is so important is because you're going to need something to keep you motivated. I mean, I know that reaching this goal and success could be its own reward, but you need something tangible so that you can push through when things get tough. It could be an extra night of Netflix, or, I don't know, chocolate, a glass of wine, whatever makes you happy. But have a planned reward system either along the way or at the end so that you don't give up and revert to your old habits. I'm going to tell you guys and be honest with you that this is really tough for me, and it took me a long time to figure out what I would do. In general, I'm a very self-disciplined person. I'm extremely intrinsically motivated. So I just work hard for the sake of working hard. I don't know if any of you out there are like that, but I don't know. Hard work motivates me on its own. So I am one of those people where reaching the goal is a reward in and of itself. But the problem is I internalize too much like this, where it can actually take the joy away from teaching. So I need to take time to praise and reward myself for doing a good job rather than just expecting it of myself. I can't just sit there and suffer in silence. I need to, celebrate and reward myself for all of the good stuff that I'm doing in the classroom. So when we assume that it's just business as usual and not celebrate small wins, it can actually lead to burnout. When we feel unappreciated or unrecognized for doing well, it can start to take a mental toll on our teaching. We start to wonder, what's the point of working so hard if it seems like it doesn't matter to anybody else but myself? So taking the time to even just pat ourselves on the back or share our wins with a colleague is important. It's not bragging, especially if you also recognize others for what they're doing well. So after some hemming and hawing, because like I said, I'm just intrinsically motivated, and I had to come up with something special, not just like, buy something on Amazon, because I always buy something on Amazon. If I can pull this off, if my students improve based on the quizzes, based on their writing and in-class conversations about their writing, I'm going to get myself a massage. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's something I've wanted to do for a really long time. It's not really in my budget right now, so it's not like I could go and do that anytime. So it also kind of makes it a treat, a reward for me. I thought about something big like, going on some kind of weekend, something, but I can find a million reasons to put that off. A million reasons why that's not going to work. But a massage is big enough where it's a big deal, but not so big that I will find an excuse to not do it. So that's for me. And I want you to take time to really think of something that will truly be a reward if you succeed with this one small change and with reaching the goal. So I'm going to go ahead and put these tips in the show notes so that you don't have to be taking notes furiously and having to rewind. That way you can go through these steps and figure out that one small thing that you can change to improve your teaching this semester. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what that one small change is going to be or what your goal is and how you're going to reward yourself. So if you could send me an email at kim@teachersneedteachers.com, let me know. I'd love to hear it. I'll try to support you in any way that I can to help you achieve that goal. So you can even, keep me updated along the way. And if you're running into problems, just reach out and maybe we can troubleshoot together. And don't forget about leaving a voicemail, you guys. I love these messages and I'd love to hear about why you love teaching or what you're looking forward to with teaching. So just go to teachersneedteachers.com/voices. So thanks again for hanging out with me today, and I hope you have a fabulous week.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.